topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Ask the Expert show. This is our 12th year of Ask the Experts. Unbelievable. And what's really unbelievable is a lot of our experts who started with us in the beginning are still with us. That's pretty amazing. This morning, we've got an incredible show. It's our estate planning show. And I think what makes it so incredible is our expert has got such a great heart, a blessed heart for this. And when you do estate planning, you've really got to care about people, about families. And we could not have been luckier to find Attorney Baker. Good morning, Debbie.
Steve. I feel so old when somebody says that I'm their attorney. It's like,
what's that?
who are they talking about? I have no idea. It's like, okay. All right. Anyway, so how are you this morning? You're great.
We're doing good. You know what? If I were you, I would pinch myself every morning and praise God that He has put me in a position like this to help families. And as an estate planning attorney, that's exactly what you do.
It is exactly what I do. I don't know that I pinch myself every morning. No, it's an interesting image. What I do is that when somebody comes to me and asks me a question, or I can make somebody's life easier about this whole thing, I just am so glad that he sent me to law school, because it was it was a good thing to have done. So,
yes. Debbie, your story is so amazing. Would you share that with everybody, how you got started in practice?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully some of you have heard this before, but since I say it, often, but when I was a lot younger, I thought about law school, and I thought of law school 3 times in the past. Never went, always had a great excuse. One was money. One was I wasn't going to take contracts and torts because I was too old. That always makes me laugh. One was I wasn't going to go to school and get a license to practice in California when I lived in Florida and wasn't moving. But then almost amazingly enough, 16 years ago, while I was trying to figure out what I was going to be when I grew up, so to speak, God told me to go to law school. And I became a person of faith back in 1984. So it wasn't unusual for me to ask him questions. This particular answer shook me. See, the cat came to visit. He heard your voice. I was pretty freaked out. Some of you may have had the experience of, deciding at some point or being led to do something different than you've always been doing and trying to figure out what in heaven's name is somebody trying to tell me. Well, I remember being in an 8 by 10 foot room, pretty much, and freaked out, hyperventilating, trying to figure out how I was going to do it. And I remember to ask God a follow-up question, which was when. And he said, I heard, get ready. And people said, did you really hear a voice? Was it your head? I said, I tell you, I heard a voice. But anyway, when I heard get ready, I had no idea what that meant. Absolutely no idea what that meant. But I did figure I could handle it, whatever it went. So I went on this journey about thinking about going to law school, to going to law school, to going to law school in Florida, to going to law school regardless of where it was supposed to be. And then if I had to, transfer back to Florida. And took almost took almost 3 years before I started. So on August 22nd of this year, it'll be 13 years since I started law school. So that can make this video dated. Anyway, I graduated in 2015 and I went into estate planning because my coaching practice, which is what I've done, personal coaching, life coaching, was all about being of service. And estate planning is it's really amazing, the service it could be. And for those of you who may be lawyers or, work with lawyers and have professions, you understand that when you started, you knew nothing. So when I started, I knew nothing. I didn't know that 18-year-olds needed wills. I didn't know that beneficiary designations made a whit of difference, or you didn't necessarily what they were. I didn't know that when you buy a home, you better buy it the way you want a title should one of you die so that the other can own the home. I didn't know any of that. And I've learned that over the last 9 years. And so the more I learn, the more valuable my knowledge becomes, because people don't know. And when they say, I didn't know that, I always say, well, there's no reason in the world you should have known that. You shouldn't know how to fix your own TV or your own refrigerator, and you shouldn't know a thing about your estate plan because you don't do it. So it's been very gratifying for the people whose lives I make easier because I give them some knowledge. And some of my favorite stories, and I've probably told Steve this, are the people who call and say, such and such happened, what do I do? And they give me the background and I say, you do this, this, and this, and you don't have to pay me a penny because you don't need me. You take this to the Department of Motor Vehicles and they'll transfer the title. You take this to the bank and they'll give you the money. So it's like, those are like, hasn't happened a lot, maybe half a dozen times in 9 years, but what a gift. I mean, it's just so much fun. And, I get to be of service and they haven't spent any money. And, I've also gotten to the point now where if people say, well, your fees are too high, I said, listen, I don't really care who you work with. Just go get it done. Just don't do it online necessarily, but, hire a professional, get it done. Just get it done. So anyway, so that's kind of the story.
Well, as an attorney, what is your perspective on most important thing a person can do when it comes to estate planning?
Is know what they have. Whether it's pull together, I've sent out many people my estate planning worksheets. They're pretty boilerplate. They're not the same as everybody else, whatever, but it's the idea that you pull together everything you can think of that you own, not necessarily making a list of all the physical things, but all the intangible things. You own your home, you have 4 bank accounts, you have 2 life insurance policies, you have a retirement plan, you have a pension, whatever. And it's pulling it together all in one space so you can see it. Because what a lot of people find, and I know this was true with me, is I had a lot more, whether individually as items or collectively as dollars than I thought I had. And I had never pulled it together before. So that's a great place. It's a great place to start. And then from there, it's looking at who do you want to help you when you need help? And people get caught up in, well, I need to appoint my husband, or I need to appoint my wife, or I need to appoint my brother or whomever, or I need to appoint somebody in my family because that's what they're thinking or that's what they're hearing. And none of that's true. You need to appoint people who will do the job you want when the time comes. So for instance, right now, I've got several people who did their documents long ago when the people they appointed were long ago younger, 20 years younger, 30 years younger, whatever. And now they're saying, oh my gosh, I just turned 65 or 66. The person I appointed as trustee excuse me, he's biting my finger. The person I appointed as trustee is 70. He's fine, but I can't imagine he'd want to do this now. So now you have to find somebody else. Somebody recently asked me, this all really does answer your question, how often do you review documents? I said, every 3 to 5 years, because you just don't know. Well, the biggest thing you don't know for sure is whether you would really appoint those people again, because you haven't thought about it, right? But the biggest thing is, are they still, my brother who lives in Colorado last year, well, this is several years ago, actually, he was diagnosed with the beginnings of dementia. Well, his wife was smart enough to not get lost in that, but to go and change her documents immediately so that he was no longer anywhere able to represent her, because he was no longer capable. Very sad, very sad. And she was right on top of it. So fortunately, they have they have one child, but he's a very mature adult. And so she took Andy London out of his documents and put David London in, but now it's done. But the biggest thing, back is pull together everything you own. The tangibles can be taken up later, unless you have collections and stuff like that, gun collections or, valuable stamp collections or whatever. But pull it all together so whoever you have help you, you can present them with something to start with. Then I would say, once you have it together, it's going to all those financial people and having a conversation about who gets this money when something happens to me. So, you and Sophia may own things together, bank accounts or whatever. And the thing that people forget is they think, okay, so if something happens to me, he or she gets it. Well, the challenge is if something happens to the two of you together, then what happens? And people forget, well, what do you mean? My son gets it. Well, maybe, but not without going to court. So start with the inventory, so to speak, and then get some grounding and then branch out to there to all those other difficult decisions.
Just got a text from a listener, Jerome in Tampa. I'm really enjoying your show. I always thought you had to have a lot of assets to do your estate planning. Is that true?
No, thank you, Jerome. That's a great question, because that's one of the misnomers misconceptions. People think they have to have a lot. Here's what I learned. If you have any money in the bank, $500, whatever, and you don't somehow at least have a beneficiary designation on that account, which doesn't need an attorney, that money is not available to anybody in your world when you pass. So people don't do their plans, Jerome, because they don't think they have anything. They think it's too expensive and they've never checked it out. They just listen to their friends tell them how expensive it is, which they may not have checked it out either, but they haven't checked it out. And they think the last one that always makes me laugh, and I've shared this, they think they'll die as soon as they do it. But there's no dollar, that's just hysterical. There's no dollar value on assets. If you have any money in the bank, you need a plan at least as much as a beneficiary, which does not require a lawyer. You could use a power of attorney, which would give somebody else the right to access that money if they needed it to pay a bill for you or something like that. You need the healthcare surrogate, which is giving somebody the right to make medical decisions for you if you're not able to do it. So your power of attorney and your healthcare surrogate are documents that live while you're alive. A will is for what happens after you pass. And what I've learned over the last 9 years is oftentimes the will is the catch-all for something that may happen that you couldn't predict. So right now I have one case where a woman's husband died is part of the Camp Lejeune class action. A lot of people had exposure to carcinogens. Camp Lejeune, there's a big class action. She had a will, but she'd never started a probate. So she had to create another legal entity so that whenever that settles, she's got a place to collect it. So Jerome, I would recommend you call somebody and, you know, have a conversation about what you do have. And the good attorneys will tell you truthfully. Right now, if you get this beneficiary designation in place, you're not necessarily expecting an inheritance or whatever, and you at least do this, you're going to be okay. Come back and do the others because they really can't hurt to have. People die in car accidents. People die, unfortunately, for medical malpractice, where there are lawsuits after death, and that will provides a way for somebody to get the estate money. So I hope that answers your question. Hope that
I think just by labeling it estate planning throws a lot of people off. They see that word estate.
Yes.
I think that's one of the things. We just got another text from a listener. I'm really enjoying your show. What if the person who has power of attorney passes away suddenly?
Good question. Okay. So here's what I recommend. It's not required by law. I recommend, two things. One, if you have a power of attorney and that person has passed away, go get yourself a new power of attorney right away. I mean, go call whoever created the first document and get a new one. I always recommend that, let's just say I have Steve as my power of attorney. Okay. And Steve and Sophia have been my friends forever. Okay. And Steve is my primary power of attorney. I always recommend a backup. Now, it doesn't have to be Sophia, but I always recommend having somebody already in place to take over that role if something happens to Steve, whether he's passed away or he's busy having surgery for something and he's in no position to do anything for me, for the next 6 weeks or something. Because then the document will say, in the event Steve is no longer able or willing to hold this role, then I appoint so-and-so as my successor. But you've got the document in place. I have a mentor that I've been working with for a long time, and I used to be adamant about people having successors. And she finally said, get off of their case, Deb. If something happens to the person they know, they'll call you back and you'll name somebody new. And I went, okay. So when people say, well, I don't have anybody.
That's a great idea. I didn't even know you could do that. Have a backup.
Oh, yes. And there are people who do more than one. So I've got clients like who do their spouse, and then they do their eldest child, and then they do their younger child. So it's just all there in the document. But for the person who wrote it, if that power of attorney has died suddenly, tragically, whatever, just call whoever did that original document for you and appoint another person. And if you have somebody to back up that person, do that at the same time. Your power now in Florida, you have to appoint an agent. That's what they call him, that you trust completely, because that power of attorney in Florida goes into effect the minute you sign it. Other states have different formats, and the powers of attorney don't go into effect until you become incapacitated as determined by doctors, I guess. But in Florida, it goes into effect immediately. So you really want to trust that person having access to your financial information completely, that they're not going to do anything nefarious, anything underhanded, anything that will hurt you in any way. And sometimes people will say, I wouldn't trust my daughter with $50. I'm not giving her this power. Good. Don't give her this power. Very smart. Very smart. Hope that answers the question.
We got another text. Wow, we get a lot of texts today. People enjoying the show. And this person wants to know, are you only allowed to practice estate planning law in the Tampa area?
No, No, I can practice in the entire state of Florida. Once,
Okay.
once you cross the border into Georgia, I'm not licensed, but I am licensed to practice in the entire state. So the county you're in is not relevant. So yeah,
And thank God for Zoom.
Zoom makes all the difference in the world. I still do all my document signing in person. Something interesting. Florida started DocuSign or notary, electronic notary. But to the best of my
Yes.
knowledge, when they started and even now, you cannot do your power of attorney electronically. So if that's the case,
Oh,
why would I go and get everything else signed and then that might as well just go and and get them all signed at the same time. So
right.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
What
I
are
practice.
some of the
Go
key,
ahead.
what are some of the key surprise areas that people generally don't know about that will cause a lot of distress if they fail to plan properly?
I would say the beneficiaries are the biggest hurdle. I mean, so again, you and Sophia have bank accounts together, and it's been confirmed by your financial institutions. If something happens to you, the money goes to the other. No questions, no questions. But nobody ever said to you, who's going to get this if the two of you pass together?
Yeah.
And that's when people say, well, it'll go to my son. We've been married 40 years. We have one child. Of course, it'll go to my son. Yes. And they have to go to court to get the right to have that money. So beneficiary designation's huge, huge. And I've got even talking to people about contingent beneficiaries. So right now I've got a client who's named her son, who's substantially younger than her, and then a good friend of hers who's the same age, and they're both in their 60s or whatever. And I said, on the off chance, totally unlikely, both of those people predecease you, where do you want your money to go? And she said, St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. I said, great. So we have the document now says all that. More importantly, her bank and her credit union both have that now on their files. So there won't be any probate. Somebody shows up with a death certificate and they get the money. The other one, and you and I have discussed this before, Steve, is people buy homes together, whether it's mothers and sons or fathers and daughters or life partners or whatever. And when they buy a home, nobody asks them how they want that home titled. So any situation I've had is more than I ever want to have. And I know we're running out of time. But when you buy a home, when you buy a residence with somebody, you need to be, if you're husband and wife, it's not a problem. You equally own you both own the home. And when one of you passes, the other automatically owns the home. But if you're not married and you don't pay attention, the title to the home will be granted in two different names, which by law makes you each 50% owners of the home. And when one of you passes, that person's family owns 50% of your home. And that was never anything you planned, and that was never anything you wanted. And I've learned, so I recommend if you're going to buy a home, before you do the title, if they don't ask you how you want to own it, call somebody who knows, pay them a little money or ask them as a favor, what do you recommend for ownership of this home? So if one of us dies, the other owns the whole thing. And it's easily done. And that's been probably the second thing I run up against. Half a dozen times. We bought this house together. We borrowed money. We did a mortgage. I don't own the house. No, you don't own the house.
Debbie, we have been running your phone number and how people can reach you for those who are watching the show. Excuse me, for those who are listening, please give us your phone number and your website, how they can reach you.
Okay, so my phone number is 813-586-1332, 813-586-1332. The website is London, like the city, londonbakerlaw.com. Some people drop out the law. So londonbakerlaw.com. And the email is debbaker@londonbakerlaw.com with 2 B's in the middle. So yeah, I mean, any of the people who texted, if you want to have a conversation, I don't charge for my consultations. I'm always thrilled to help. But yeah, I'd love to talk to you.
Debbie will be back with us again. She's always the last Monday of the month. Very simple, at 9:00. Debbie, thank you. We adore you, and we'll see you again next month.
Okay, thanks, kiddo. So long, Rebel.
Thanks, Debbie. That's Attorney Debbie Baker, wonderful estate planning attorney. We're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to be doing our personal injury show. We'll be right back.
And we are back with the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV with your hosts, Steve-O, Sophia, and their expert guests.